Welcome to Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. We are book coaches, editors, and besties, and we are discussing books not as readers, but as writers to draw on inspiration from great books and lots of laughs. This week, we are talking about plot for our book for the month, which is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Did I say it right?
Close.
Novik. Y'all,
It's simpler actually than you thought it was.
Listen, I feel like every time we get a different name, I spend the whole 4 episodes trying to get it right. We're going to get it right though. So we are talking about plotting this week. But before we get into the discussion, which I think is going to be really juicy, let's find out what's going on with Rachel and Story Cipher.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I'll be interested to see how the whole conversation plays out, since we have a little bit of sort of differing perspective, I think, on the book, just a smooge. And that's a lot of that is so much of our difference in taste and disposition in books. But I think we've got a lot of really good stuff coming up. So this is 2026 is a pretty big year. I've got, I think, 5 clients on deck aiming to publish this year. Because several of my clients have been working for the last couple of years on their books. So if you're new, Dana, you and your authors publish a lot faster than most of the clients that I work with, who many of them are pitching traditional, or they're going slow burn self-pub. So for them, many of them have spent the last year and a half to 2 years working on their current novel. Some of them have been working on them for longer before they came to me. But it's a really big, it's a big time, because I'm working with 3 different clients who are working on their query letters. So I've been working with them on getting their queries together, which is just, I think that it's every author's sort of least favorite part, because it's you spent all this time writing the actual book, and now you have to package it, and you sort of have to put on your marketing brain with the way that you package it for the query letter, because you're looking at, you've got a 200-word summary that has to tell an agent tell me why I should pick your book out of the slush pile, right? You're really having to sell them in this much space. And if you can get them past that space, then you usually are getting them past the summary, right? Of every chapter in the book. And then if you can get them past that one, then you got to get them past these layers of the gates that you have to go through. So you really got to make that. It's you spent all this time making the manuscript shine, and now you have to spend time making the query shine so that they can get to your manuscript, which shines. So that's it's a really exciting time too, because this is this is the home stretch of the project, right? Now it's let's go out and find a home for your story, which is really, really cool. So this is how it always seems to go. My clients, even though they work completely separate from each other, they all always wind up in the same place at the same time. So they all were ready to start querying right around the same time. So all of a sudden my work shifted to a lot of query focused stuff. Whereas before it was a lot of developmental edits, and then it went oh, now all I'm doing is looking at query letters and working on query packages and stuff. I've got 2 who are going to do self-pub, which I'm also really excited about. One of them is taking kind of a daring marketing tour kind of thing to kind of drum up some excitement about his book, which I'm really excited about. So at the time of this recording, he will be in the middle of kind of this big marketing tour that he's kind of going on. So it's a big, we've got all of the publishing stuff happening. Again, it's everyone was working, and then all at once they were all done at the exact same time, and the nature of the work shifted so fast. So it's really exciting. Again, that's always so exciting when you get, you're getting close to publication. For 4 of my 5 clients, these are debuts. And so that's really exciting too, for them to like have finished their first novel and be like actively like querying or getting ready for that self pub. So yeah, it's a big moment, and it's hilarious that everybody's having it at the same time. And I'm like, I guess this is just what we're doing now.
I think that is so amazing. I was having a conversation with a writer probably last week or the week before, and just sort of like when you're entering that phase, that it can be so nerve wracking or it can make you so nervous. But when you really think about it, as in you finding a home for your book and working and partnering with a publisher that cares about what you're writing as much as you do, that it becomes a little bit less about them picking you, but about you picking each other
Yeah.
and knowing what your options are so that you don't feel like you're just waiting for someone to sort of pick you.
Yeah.
And I think that helps you to go into it with a lot more confidence,
Yeah.
because it can be a long road. And so
Yeah.
understanding like what those options are and what does it look like for you, and what, when you sort of look at your list, like what's on that list of the home that you would want for that book and the
Yeah.
experience that you would want as an author as you move through the future stages, because that is so important, because everyone is going to be different, and the types of agents that you look for and the types of publishers that they pitch to, like that
Mm-hmm.
makes a huge difference and can really have a determining factor of like what does your trajectory look like in
Yeah.
the future, right?
Yeah, and I think too, it's like there's also a lot of like, I think there's a lot of comfort in that too, like because just because one agent feels like, oh, I don't think that I'm the right person to represent this book, or this isn't the kind of thing I'm looking for, like that exact same point is like there's so many different agents who are representing so many different types of authors in different types of genres with different bends to different presses to really like, so if one agent doesn't feel like they're the right fit for your book, there are so many different types who represent so many different types of books and in so many different ways. It just means that they're not the right one, but there's so many others out there. And so it's not all writing on, one or
Yeah,
two or even three age. I mean, when people go out on submission,
it's
you
a
are
lot.
talking to everybody. And so that's really, I think there's a little bit, even though that also means that the process is long because you're submitting to a lot of people in a lot of different places. And I think average response times, I mean, like fastest turnaround is like 6 weeks.
So,
So,
and
and
that's
that's
on a
that.
good day.
I was gonna say that's if they're like rocking and rolling. That number is
Exactly.
ticking up, right? Because that pile is just growing and growing and growing.
Exactly.
And so you're looking more 8, 10. The just really it stretches out. And so I think that really can help, so that it's not just like, oh, it's writing on this small handful, but there's really a breadth of them. That can Is it going to take off the nervy edge to it? Probably not all
Probably
of
not.
it, but it helps with some of it, right?
Or like
And
for managing expectations.
yes, yeah, which is a big conversation when we shift into this part. It's like, okay, I need you to know this is going to take a while. Like this part of the process, it purely on the basis of like response time, this is going to take a long time. And that
Mhm.
also means that this is a really, really great time to start working on your next thing, right?
That's it.
Work on your next project, keep that creative fire going, get into the excitement of a new project, and let yourself keep doing that practice, because you can't fiddle with your query letter endlessly, right? Like you'll
Hmm.
normally, some of the best advice I've seen is like you send out to like a handful at a time, because then if you're getting feedback about something about your query letter that isn't landing, because once you submit, right, that's it. You can't resubmit for the same manuscript, and so giving you the opportunity to kind of like calibrate the feedback you're getting in case there's some information that you can pull for making tweaks that are going to help you with your next submission. So that's why it's a
Hmm.
really, really good time to spend your writing time working on your next project and keep that thing moving, because this project isn't your only project, right? You
Hmm.
have a whole host of books inside of you. So keep letting them come out and let this process take its course as it as it needs to.
Exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
What about you? Always a busy day over at Danger Tales. What you got going on?
it's
Did
like
I gave
what
you 10 minutes to think through your small talk? Was it enough?
it was like, oh, it's my turn.
Like, boy, that happened
um,
fast.
it did. It did. Um, Oh, because my brain was sort of thinking about one last thing about what you were talking about too was like about not just moving, like continuing to write, but also when it comes to querying, look at your options. I think
Mhm.
sometimes people totally miss out on opportunities to do things like go to genre specific conferences to be able to get in
Yeah.
front of agents in those places because that may
Mhm.
help with speeding up that process or help you to problem solve areas in your query that need to be addressed before you start those rounds. And so
Yeah.
don't forget about that.
Yeah.
Um Listen, all the years of working with traditionally published authors, like baby, we had to learn all the loopholes. But yeah, or at least trying to get you there faster. Because the faster you get to the no, the faster you move on or know when you need to make adjustments. And so that just
Yeah.
can taking it as helpful information to move forward, right?
Definitely.
And so yeah, so that's what my brain was sort of thinking about. So for me, honestly, things have been, I feel like they've been busy, but at the same time, it feels like almost like nothing's happening. It's weird.
Mm.
It's like you're like doing stuff, but it's realizing like everybody's in sort of this in the phase where it just takes longer to do. So like right now we have sprint students that are in the writing part, and this is our first time doing the sprint where they are submitting their manuscripts and I'm reading them as they go versus at the end. And
Mm.
so that has been really interesting. And then also as a community, like when we get to the end of the quarter, we're almost preparing to turn the to go into another phase of our writing cycle. So that has just been interesting. So I think that's why I'm realizing like at the end of the quarter, this is what it feels like. Because after doing it a couple times, you realize like, oh, okay. Because at the beginning,
Yeah.
it's so busy. I have one-on-ones, I have people
Mhm.
um either new people starting in a different area, so it means that I'm busier, so I have to really take advantage of these weeks and not just feel like like
Where your brain is tempted to shut down because there's nothing driving it immediately, and so you're
listen.
like, I'm just gonna curl up for a moment. You're like, no, I can't. Like, I'm gonna regret this in 3 weeks.
Exactly. Or if you're gonna luxuriate. Okay, because if I'm gonna be busy later, let me get in all of the painting, reading, whatever time. So yeah, it's just like realizing like we're at the end of the quarter and it just like at the time of this recording and it just um feels more like okay, I have some breathing room,
Mhm.
which has brought about the thing that I know you're going to be more interested in. I have plotted my cozy mystery completely. The
Oh,
plot is done. Like
okay.
I'm talking about done. Like
Wait, I have too many questions. Dang it! Please let me let you finish your thought. I'm getting too excited and it's making me
no,
like.
you can go ahead. That's the thought. Like so okay. I sort of what I started y'all, this is hard to explain because I'm in my mind I'm talking to Rachel, but I gotta remember I'm y'all here too. So so what I've been doing is I've been blocking out a time to work on projects that I feel like I've been wanting to work on forever, but I
Yeah,
just don't make time for. And I tell myself like you are not getting out of this seat until that time is up. Even if you have nothing to
yeah.
do or you can't think of anything. So that's what I've been doing. And one of them was the cozy mystery. And I always felt like oh, I want to do this, but I just don't have enough mystery in my brain to come up with an idea. Even though I sort of had like little pockets of like little spurts of ideas that I could kind of see a thread, but not really see a thread. And so I've been sitting down and having these times and sort of just started doing brainstorming. And then all of a sudden, like I'm saying all of a sudden, but it didn't happen all of a sudden. But as time progressed,
Yeah.
I started getting traction and was like, wait a minute, I think I have something here. And then of course, knowing me, I'm like, okay, this can't just be for one book. Like, how does this turn into a series? How does this turn into multiple books? And sort of just starting to flesh that out. And so, yeah, like I have the, you would be so proud. You would be so proud because listen, I was like, where are my bodies? Who's dropping? Because I was like, I may not know I have enough bodies. I can't introduce people because then I won't kill them. So,
No one is safe in this cute small town.
listen, I want everybody to be safe. It's cozy, but no. And so but what one of the things that I do want to bring here is like I really what I realized as I was doing this was a couple of things that I think would be really worth sharing here, which is instead of it being like, okay, I have nothing, I started looking at, okay, every time I was ready to say that, I was like, okay, but what do I have?
Yeah.
And starting just to sort of put that down. So every time I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I don't have an answer for that, but I do know this. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, why was his body dead? I don't know. Quit asking me questions. But it's like, okay, instead of that, and I had this like pivotal moment where I felt like what's her name? Angela, what was her, Lansbury from Murder She
Oh,
Wrote, whatever her name
yeah.
was. I was like, wait a minute. I think I'm bringing on her Murder She Wrote's vibe. And that I was like, wait, why was the body like intact? Like I could see in my mind that the body was intact. I'm like, a body would not be intact after 30 years. Why is that? Like my husband was like, who are you talking to?
Yes.
I'm talking to myself, but it's working.
I'm talking to
So
myself, and dang it, I'm brilliant.
listen. And if I'm not, I'm going to tell myself I am until we get to the end. And so once I really started getting into it and like, okay, what do I know? It was so amazing to me how a lot of the threads that I've carried over the years and even tried to sprinkle in other ways because I knew they were good threads really vibed and how they were just
Mm,
sort of waiting for the right place to be inserted. Um, and then, um, and then also being really clear about the aspects of the story that I knew I didn't want to change, like
mhm,
knowing that even in this space there are not a lot of Black protagonists,
mhm.
but I knew that I wanted a Black protagonist. I knew I wanted that. Also knowing that there is no way I was going to be letting my romantic thread go, so it's going to just be there. So it's, and granted, we know cozy mysteries are a slow burn. I'm like,
Yeah.
baby, he gonna be right up in there.
Wait, okay. Is it going to be steamy as well, or are you
No.
going to like okay? Because I
But
know
I'm
that
gonna do
like
Fade to Black.
okay, gotcha.
I think I'm leaving room for that. I want the romance to be there. The romance actually plays a huge part over time. I'm building this. I haven't seen it done, and so I'm just taking creative liberty on a couple of things. Knowing that I'm just giving myself a lot of creative wiggle room here. But it is, so I've sort of plotted out the whole series and I sort of did like a mystery in a mystery.
Mhm.
Um, because as I was going on, I kept asking myself, especially after we read book two and the Demigods of San Francisco.
Yeah.
I've been still reading that, and now I'm on book four. And there were some things that really rose to the surface that I liked that she did. And I was like, oh, I like this aspect. And so that kind of influenced how I did some things. And I think even some parts of like what we'll talk about across this book and like how do you hold people for $6 when you have the same person?
Mhm.
How do you continue to have sort of open up that curiosity loop without it feeling like they're being sort of drugged for too long or
Mhm.
dragging it out too long? And then also some of the things that feel like they're just so me. The
Mhm.
first one involves a quilt. A quilt is a part of it.
Mhm.
And a very interesting turn of events is that it is paranormal, which I was very surprised by. Yeah,
Ooh.
very, very, very surprised by. But it
Can you
works. It really works.
can you tell me about the paranormal element, or will that
Yeah.
spoil things? Like, I don't know how much of like what element of that's
It
a
w-
surprise, so I
it
don't want
won't
to.
spoil it. I don't think it'll spoil it. Y'all, I do not have the like fancy clean premise or whatever to share, but I will say this. Her um Dottie, this is the protagonist. Dottie sort of is coming into this small town to close up the affairs of her grandmother who died. And it's her grandmother that she knows exists, but she didn't spend a lot of time with her because her grandmother was thought of as crazy.
Mm,
Like not crazy like but
mhm,
crazy as in because she has this gifting that people
mhm,
don't understand. So I'm sort of
mm,
playing with that thematically, and it's
yeah,
actually the same thing that Dottie sort of air quotes suffers with.
yeah,
And so what happens is her grandmother helps her solve the crime. Her grandma comes to her,
nice,
she can see her grandmother. And so that becomes this thing that she grows in her skills and abilities across those 6 books
yeah,
through her grandmother's sort of tutelage of her grandmother. But then there's more to it, even that the grandmother didn't realize that was at play that we will.
cool.
Yeah. So that's how the paranormal aspect will come in.
That's exciting. Okay, question, because I know like you've been sort of you've had this idea in your mind for like a what, right? It's kind of been like lingering on for a while, but it didn't always have an actual murder mystery component to
It
it,
did
right?
it
I didn't
ever.
think so because historically when we've talked about it, it's been more of like a mystery of like it's like a history mystery kind of thing where it's like
Yep.
unwrapping like the truth of what used to happen and doing all of that. And so what made you decide to go like because that when you said you were doing a cozy, my brain largely because of the genres that I work in, I went to cozy murder mystery.
Right.
What led you to the pivot to go from sort of cozy general mystery to like cozy murder mystery to incorporating like murders?
Well, I think because I feel like, oh, low key for real, it was a cop out before because I didn't know what to do.
Mm,
So that's why I had to just put the time. I was like, you're not getting up until because I did the ones that end up being a cozy romance.
yeah,
But then the mystery was sort of there, but I didn't even feel like, girl, don't you tell nobody that's a mystery because it's not strong enough.
yeah,
Like I know that enough. And so I just kept saying like, okay, what do I need? What do I need? Like,
hmm,
and once I started sort of going into it, y'all, this is where right talking as a writer can sound so woo woo, but I am the person where I will see scenes, like I will be like in my head see scenes, and once I started building enough that I saw a body, I knew I was onto something. Now there was
yeah,
parts of it that I didn't realize until I got towards the end because I stopped.
hmm,
I was like, wait a minute, wait, why do I see the body whole? Like a body after 30 years is not going to be whole. And that's
hmm,
when I realized like, oh, now I'm on to something. Cause then you start all the other ideas of shooting out of like why that would be so.
yeah,
And so I think part of it was like challenging myself to see the story fully the way that I wanted it to be, even though I
hmm,
didn't know what that was yet. And I think the designation is a big part of that. It's like when I'm telling clients all the time, I'm like, deciding what your subgenre is does more than just establish reader expectations. It
yeah,
begins to tell you how that story unfolds in the way that your readers show up for.
hmm,
And I also feel like in the other stories, it not having that murder mystery to me also took away a part that can help you with your escalating stakes, your tension, your conflict,
yeah,
right? And you can have it without that if you just want to go straight cozy. Like now it's all kinds of cozy, like cozy cottage, cozy room,
yeah,
like all this other stuff. But I was like, you know what? Like I want to hang my hook on something that has legs, like over
yeah.
time. And I think a part of me knew that I wanted it to be a murder mystery. I just did not trust what I had was there. So I eventually had to figure out how to have both, how to have
Yeah.
the murder mystery and then have the sort of legs that makes me excited about writing a story. And I think I've
Yeah.
done that. Like I'm at the point where I can start drafting the first book. Um and so we'll see. I'll know for sure
Yay.
once the draft is done and I can sort of see it all
Mm-hmm.
together. But
Yeah.
I feel really confident about what I have.
Yay! Oh my god. This is dear listener or watcher, this is legitimately the first I'm hearing of this. So this response where I can't, like, I was like, "Wait, let me break in with questions. I have a question. Wait, let me let you finish." That whole, like, this is, you're seeing live on air as I am finding out that this is, not only is this mystery she's been talking about finally happening, but it turns out it's a murder mystery, which is my favorite thing in the whole stinking world. I just, oh man, that is,
Well,
I'm very
don't listen.
excited.
Don't get too excited because girl ain't gonna be no whole bunch of bodies. I have a client that she does cozy mysteries, and she was like, "What about the second body? Third? Girl, quick, we're not dropping all them bodies, okay? We're just it's gonna be a body. That's all I can commit to. A body per
In all
story."
fairness, not, especially too, like, depending on like what book you're in, right? Like if you're in book one versus book four or something like that, how many bodies you drop is going to, like, you can get away with just investigating one body, right? Especially because this is like book one, and it's like, okay, well, we can't kill off the whole town before we ever have a chance
Already.
to do this series.
Well, yeah. So once I was waiting to like get into a real good working place so that when I show you, so you can, because you may be like, girl, you can't, like, I don't know about this, I don't know about that, because I was really intentional about how I did it, and I just wanted it to almost sort of be in a bubble, like in a silo, before I sort of
Mm-hmm.
like looked outside of it,
Yeah.
because I'm still exploring just what are the things I need to know and what are the components that I want to know in advance. And once I had that, then I did something that I'm calling like a cause and effect chain with the bodies that I wanted to do to build
Yeah.
out across the series so I could see it at an airplane view of like where I was going. I'm
That's
aiming to
great.
do a pretty tight word count, and
Yeah.
I thought that I would really need to know that because I am not aiming for really long books. And so we'll
Mm-hmm.
see. We'll see. Who knows? It could be everything, it could be nothing. But I can say that it is bringing in like all the elements of what I like in the story on into sort of one place. I just actually at one point just was like, okay, if I was writing this like a suspense or as a thriller, like what are the things I would ask? And then begin to say, okay, well, how do I translate that into a
Yeah.
mystery?
Yeah.
Because it's close, but it's not the same thing. And also the fact that I wanted a lot of those things because at the end of the day, for this, it is a lot about her transformation and her relationship
Yeah.
with her grandmother and her relationship with the world because of this ability.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that I was like, oh my gosh, technically, this is paranormal. Oh my goodness, technically, there's magic at play here. Oh my goodness. Like, so it was every time I
Guys, I
just felt,
think I'm rubbing off on Dana.
oh
She
my
may not
gosh.
always approve of my book picks, but I think there might just be an effect happening
Oh my
here
gosh.
that's just slowly just inching its
I'd
way into
say,
her subconscious.
I would say your book selections are very helpful. I do know that a lot of it will be like, okay, I'm not doing it. However, watching it play out, it makes it easier. Like, I'm always about you have to know the rules before you break them. I don't think I'm breaking rules. I
Sure.
think exposure to other things will say, okay, but this is how it looks in this environment. And so, yes,
Yeah.
I would definitely say that. Because before, if anytime you're saying anything about ghosts, I'd be, oh, heck to the no. But it's, so
All of
I'm
a
very,
sudden, ghosts are into your story.
girl, I was like, oh no, she has got to be the comic relief. Because if I get the heebie jeebies, I am not showing up for that writing session. Heebie jeebies are not allowed. Okay. I want the
Oh
feels,
man.
not those feels. Those are not the feels.
Not those feels. Awesome. I'm
Oh
so, well,
gosh.
you please keep me posted. Once you get the draft done, as you're drafting, either on air or
Oh yeah, you'll be
privately.
knowing like in all the ways. Right now it was just like, okay, I'm just blocking out time and seeing where it lands me. And then once it started rolling so fast that I had to be like, give more time to get it out. So since it was finally starting to make sense, and so towards the end, it went super fast. But it was a lot of sessions of just sitting here like, I don't know. I don't know this. I don't know that. So yeah. So yeah, you guys will know. But let's go ahead and dive into this episode. Oh, definitely, as always, you guys, if you have questions, just ask. We are talking about this in real time. It could be everything or nothing, because things change day to day. But I think that's a part of the writing journey, right? As well.
Mm-hmm.
Giving yourself, and that probably would be the last thing. Of like, I gave myself very clear permissions. Like, you can change your mind. It could be
Yeah.
whatever the story needs. Like, I'm not trying to whip it into shape, but when it was time to sort of codify like everything that I was putting together, then that's when it sort of like was a tighter structure. And so just having a great time doing that. But as we jump into spinning silver for this episode and talking about plot, we are going to dive into this discussion. But first, Rachel, hit us with the summary.
I've got you with my summary. All right. In this Rumpelstiltskin inspired fairy tale, Miriam is a moneylender's daughter living in a small town near Lithfuss, where Starrick raiders and lengthening winters threaten to bring ruin to palace and peasant alike. Her soft hearted father refuses to collect repayment, plunging the family into poverty and forcing Miriam to take over the family business. There's nothing magical about Miriam's keen eye for business, turning silver into gold, until she catches the attention of a Starrick king, and Miriam is wrapped up in a conflict of czars, demons, and Starrick. Caught between two worlds and the conflict between them, Miriam must fight to protect her family, her people, and choose whether she's going to be a pawn or a queen.
Come on. I love that summary.
Thank you.
So,
I was very excited about it.
if
I
you're
was
not
like,
watching, the fist pump will let you know that this was a Rachel pick.
okay, I'm not gonna lie, I was writing the summary and I was like, working out and I was like fine tuning it and tweaking it, which is hilarious because then I like went back and did the word count because I've been having to do stuff, under 200, like 200 words or under. And I was like, yeah, this is 105 words, bam, bam. But the moment that I was like, ooh, like there's like a chess pun here of like pawn and queen, I was like, I don't care what I have to do. I will die on the hill of having this in my summary because it's awesome. So I just thought you should know that I was like, I am fighting for this line.
Well, with that said, go ahead and let us know what are some of the things you want us to discuss in this episode when it comes to the plot in Spinning Silver.
Yes, ma'am. So I've got three main things that I want to talk about. As always, some of these things are going to end up overlapping with characters because they just can't help but do that. But I think that this story, and this connects really nicely with a conversation that we had with sin and magic. This story is a really great example of escalating the stakes without having to just, speaking of dropping bodies, right? Without just having to like feeling like escalating stakes means killing people off. And this story, I think, does such a great job of that. And sort of as a part of that, like is merciless in exposing the characters to hardship, but again, without like just dropping bodies. And so I'd love to talk about the way that that functions in this story. I also think that this is a really, really good example of developing a story where your protagonist will discover that the threat isn't what they thought it was, without it feeling like the book itself changed somewhere along the way, where you're like, wait, this is a different story than the one I started out in. And making that really seamless so that it feels like a twist, not a, did you just change books on me? Not that, not that number. And then lastly, I want to talk about how she made, how this story uses the plot to really explore themes, and using plot as a vehicle to do that. So that the plot actually gives you opportunities to explore those themes rather than feeling like maybe you're trying to jam themes on top of a plot or something. So I thought that was like a really seamless integration there. And I know we'll have some more conversation about thematic exploration over and against plot. What about you, Dana? What's on your list here?
Y'all, first of all, listen, this is Rachel's discussion. I I am just going to be a fly on the wall because I feel like this is where I'm very aware that this is not 100% my jam. So, but there are so many things that I think, especially if you're someone where we have a pick where that is not your normal pick, I think you can get so much more from it because you do notice things or you see things that you can apply in your world. So, with that said, for plot, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the multi point of view. I found that um, like having a discussion about the multi point of view being an opportunity to expand the world, like to make the world bigger, because this story has a lot of POVs. I didn't even track them, but there were a lot. But one of the things that I felt like it kept tripping me up is that it can make it so that every time you switch perspectives, you sort of can relieve some of the tension that you've worked so hard to build. And again, because she's not dropping bodies and she really is sort of moving this external plot forward through the way she sort of sets up this parallel existence. And so every time she did a switch, that was something that I noticed quite a bit. So I would love to be able to talk about that. The second thing that I have is I loved how bargaining was sort of rose to the surface for me as something that was going on in this story. And so it sort of had this theme of, well, I had a quote that I think one of the characters' fathers said, which was, nothing comes without a price. And there were so many times in this story, even without mentioning it, that it became this thing of like, what are you willing to pay? And so a lot of those major events in the story shift because someone has to decide what they're willing to pay, whether it was about survival or power or freedom or love. It all sort of left our characters with deciding like, how are they going to navigate this? And I thought that was a really, it was a great way to use both theme and also move the story forward on all three. Well, I say three. There was other point of views, but the main three. The last thing that I think is probably I don't know. I don't think it's controversial, but I think it's just maybe a me thing. But I felt like the conversation about this being a slow build versus reader engagement. I make it really known as a coach and as a writer that I'm always considering market whenever I'm working and writing. And I think a lot of times if you are considering what's going on in the market and what the norms are, that you can make those decisions in a way that helps get your book exposure and readers while still telling the story that you want to tell. And here I thought it was like um, something that had we not been, I'm gonna just keep it a buck, had we not been doing this for a book club selection, I don't know if I would have finished this book. And so I felt like the slow building of the story made it a beautiful story. I thought the prose and how it sort of unfolded was really nice. But I think readers still need a reason to keep turning the pages. And so if you decide that you do want a slower build, that you want to have enough there that keeps us on the hook. And I would really love to talk about that. I have here like, how do you write a story that builds slowly while still giving the reader enough curiosity or tension to stay engaged? Because that became an issue for me in the beginning. And I have different ways that I would have suggested if I was working with a client that had this a same or similar situation. But I did find that in this story, like I felt like the beginning sort of drug out and I was trying to figure out why that was to me. And beyond the fact that there was the parallel aspect of it, I feel like it was like, making sure that there was enough to hook us as readers so that we would want to stay. Because once the story really got rolling, I was low key upset if I got stopped or I had to pause. I was like, listen. I'm holding up the Baptist finger. You gotta wait. Let me finish this last paragraph. So, with that said, go ahead and dive us into your first topic about the escalating stakes without the bodies, or without through hardship versus body count.
Yeah. So, and this is one of those things, and I won't touch too much on this because that's sort of like a separate point that we'll talk about later. But that's what something that I found fairly compelling about the beginning. So again, I have a predisposition of like I like a beautiful story. That's like I rank that higher in things that will keep me personally engaged. Um,
Mhm.
and strong like thematic stories, which we'll also talk about in a minute. But the thing that I thought that worked um, true in the beginning, but also throughout the story, is that at no point does she ever really give her characters easy options. And I think that's one of the best ways that she like escalates the stakes on them, right? Because basically, at every turn, whenever the characters are having to make decisions, both options suck, right? Like there's not. So, for example, because this is early enough in the story that it's not really a I don't think it's really a spoiler. When she finally encounters the Staric King, right? He says, "Turn silver to gold 3 times in X amount of short deadline, or I'll turn you to ice. If you succeed, you'll be my wife." And she's like, "I hate both of those options," right? Like neither of those things is like a great option. And so what that does, right, is that like it genuinely forces the characters to make hard decisions and then to navigate the fallout of those decisions. And then as the story escalates, sort of the threat gets bigger, and the threat to life also increases, right? The actual inherent danger and the spread of that potential danger. So that, again, just from the summary, right, over the course of the story, it's sort of like I'm protecting me and mine to I'm very much personally at risk, and then, oh, this is affecting the whole kingdom. We've got, right, and that problem gets, and then it's like, oh, this is affecting 2 kingdoms, and this is getting even more complicated than I realized. So that problem is stretching out bigger, and it's getting harder to solve as they go, because as the problem gets bigger, it naturally becomes more difficult to sort of like wrangle into like, what the heck do we do? And again, without like, so that threat to life increases, but she's not having to drop bodies to do it, but rather she's it sort of makes me think of the way we handle like a mystery, right, where it's like the mystery gets deeper the further we go in, and so the plots escalate by kind
Mhm.
of going deep. And that's kind of what she does here. It's like the nature of the problem, as that continues to unravel, we recognize is bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so those threats stay present. And I think because she combines that with making the characters make really hard decisions, she's able to escalate on those stakes and escalate that threat without ever feeling like she undermines the story's own credibility, right? So sometimes when you do like a near miss, right, if you do a lot of that, it can feel like your protagonist gets plot armor where they don't have to be subjected to consequences because they're the protagonist, and the author kind of wants them to get somewhere, and that's the more important thing. And it can undermine the impact of the choices that you have your protagonist making, because it feels like, well, they don't have any consequences, so like it you lose that tension, right? And so because she does that, so we're not having people die, but that threat is escalating, and everyone's still having to make really hard choices where both options are not great and have their own sort of offshoot consequences that are propelling the story forward. We're able to do that without feeling like we've cut the tension in terms of at least the risk and the consequences. I think
Mhm.
we definitely want to have a conversation about those POVs. But I think that that's something that this story is a really strong example of, in terms of like just being merciless with your characters and the decisions they have to make, and escalating those stakes without feeling like you have to just start hacking people out of the cast.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that, I mean, I agree, and I think this is a good time to sort of just piggyback on my point because it flows well with the multi point of view. I could see that, but I think sometimes what happened was it felt cut short when you changed the point of view. A
Mhm.
lot of times what happens is being able to experience the consequence being able to sit in even the choice, those all allow you to hold on to that tension because you don't have the boom bam pow,
Mhm.
right? And so sometimes it I feel like that kind of, it's almost like you pull the air out of it. It's sort of like, listen, we went to go visit family. We're sleeping on an Arab mattress because everybody want to hang out. You know how you wake up in the morning and you low key are on the floor because all the air
Oh
was out of your mattress. That's what
yes.
this felt like. Somebody should have woke up in the middle of the night and added some more air. So I think, but here, because the other things were done so beautifully, I don't even feel like it was a huge notice if you weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
But it can have this feeling of, you feel like something is off that you can't put your finger on, and that's what
Mhm.
it is. So I think because of the discussion that we're having, it's great to notice and try to hedge against that if you decide that I really like this. I like allowing the stakes to be a true evolution of those choices. Thinking about when I was talking about that cause effect sort of chain of
Yeah.
events, and allowing that to unfold, and in a way that she kind of just sort of took her time, so that once it did ramp up, you were just in it. And so
Yeah.
when you make a decision like that, those slower moments have to be really intentional. And I
Yeah.
sort of felt like that's what were happening. So I feel like um, because of that, there were some aspects that made it almost feel adjacent to info dumping to me when the point of views changed. Because when the point of views changed, it gave us exposure to information that we didn't already know. And it almost felt like what you would have when a character goes into all of this history, or some of the histories of Jews in the community, or some of the, some of those aspects. And so it's almost as if before you decide to add another point of view, is there a way that you can do it from the characters that you currently have, so that we can keep our foot on the throttle and not sort of take it off? It doesn't mean we have to go full gas, but
Mhm.
that we keep that tension there so that it's accumulating. And I'm aware that that can also mean, like, you know what, maybe she didn't want the tension there. And that's something else I think we will end up talking about a lot, like when we get into the editor's takes. But that's just what I saw here. And I feel like the main perspectives that she had were so strong and so compelling that we really didn't need a lot of the other ones. I think we could
Yeah.
have just had them, and it would
Yep.
have given a lot more color and vibrance to their story and how they were reacting to the circumstances that they were in. And so it is a choice. It's not wrong or right, but it's just the choice that was made.
Yeah, and I want to like definitely highlight that because this is something that especially because I work with a lot of epic fantasy, I press my writers on constantly. Like because in fantasy a lot of times like it is third person multi POV, like that's sort of like very genre standard. It's easy to mistake that for using a POV, like using any POV kind of anytime. And I really like, this is something that if you are doing multiple POVs, every POV really has to earn its place in the story. And normally, especially with my newer writers, I will push them toward, can you pare it down? Can you pare it down? Do we really need this? Can we put it in the POV of a character we already have? Because it can sort of like deflate that tension. And I do think like there were a couple of POVs in this story that I was like, oh, like I don't think that we needed that one. And I agree with you. Our three primary POVs, they were the strongest part of the story. And I thought that like carrying the whole story through those perspectives, that definitely would have been my inclination as well. And so that's, I just think it's really important, like when you're talking to an author who's going to do a story that has multiple points of view, to be like, okay, has this point of view earned its place in the story? And really being very very clear about that, because it's easy for those to get and I don't, again, I Naomi Novik is a consummate professional, but for particularly for new authors, while you're still sort of working out, the story and your style, it's easy for those to get out of hand really quick, and to opt for changing POV when it's not necessary. So you're bringing in a new POV that you really didn't need, because you're trying to communicate information, or you're trying to do something specific that it's like, I get why you want to do that. Find another way to do it using the POVs you already have.
Hmm. And I will say, like, the clients that I work with that are in fantasy, a lot of them come to me because I am very aware of the reader experience. I'm also really strongly connected to stories that are character driven. And when you have the fantastical elements that you just sort of layer onto that, when you lock that in, it just makes it better. It just
Mm-hmm.
makes it better so that you can play with a lot of those things that you really want to embark with, just the world building aspect and all of that. But if it gets too noisy too soon,
Yeah.
or if you switch gears and you do it later and we are not aware that we're even switching lanes, you can lose a lot of readers. And so, and I'm not saying again, like here, I don't think anything is wrong or right. I think, as I keep saying, I think, y'all, if I say it is what I think, but I'm sorry. you you can write whatever story you want to write because you are grown. Okay, listen, don't mind me, not even a little bit. However, if you want to do it in a way that is really intentional, and I believe that gives you wiggle room where it really counts, like if you're doing something that is truly unique or no one has really seen it, reserve all that shock and wow for those moments, because a lot of what you're doing early on is building trust so they can trust you when you make a hard left when they expect you're going to go to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a part of them also building trust from this book into future books, that they begin to trust the lens that you tell the story. And that is what I'm talking about. And so if you are a person like Naomi, where you already have an established audience and you already have a following, we've talked about this many times before, that you can get away with some things that other people just cannot. I would rather you err on, you have the power and the ability to do whatever, but you still adhere to these things, because you will always cast your net wider than narrower because of that. And so, yeah, so that's all that I really want to say about that. But I feel like I get why, when we're expanding here, you're expanding the world, we're looking at it through different layers, we're looking at it through the village, the royal court, the magical realm. There's so much that is explored here, so why she would make those transitions, and why we see those different stations in life, and why we see how um the elements and the winters being drawn out, how that is affecting people at those different levels, that totally makes sense. But there's different ways that you can do it. So
Yeah.
go ahead. Oh.
Can I just want to ask a
Mm,
this is like a curious
mm,
question that came up while you were talking.
mm,
Now, because I'm thinking about Mistborn, right? And we switch often between Vin and Calcier.
mm,
Now, Mistborn, just as a story, is way plottier, right? Like it's long, and it's longer, but it's very plot driven. Did you find the POV shift? Did you have a similar experience when we would switch POV from Vin to Calcier? Did you
no,
have that same? Okay, I
because
figured
it was
because we spent
limited.
longer, yeah,
It
like
was
we would normally ride out that POV sort of to its conclusion and then go into the next one. So we sort of like finish a complete thought and then go into the next POV.
Yes, and I will say this. I think part of this, that's why, and I think this it may totally be a me thing. But it does go towards how people experience story, right? And so one of the things that happens is, if you're experiencing the story through the audiobook, you don't even know what the heck is going on until
Yeah,
you're, pretty far
a few
into it.
sentences in at
Yeah,
least.
exactly.
Yes, which
And
is
so,
pretty disorienting.
oh my gosh, it is. And so it got to the point where I'm doing both at the same time. So I think it's that. I also feel like, again, just as a example, when we talk about Miss Bourne, the way that he did it became a rhythm, and he held that rhythm all the way through. So
Yeah.
part of this becomes like, oh, okay, this is what we're getting. And every time we sort of got into that, she would introduce another character. And it
Yeah.
wasn't a character that was new to the story. It's just we hadn't did their point of view. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, what? Okay.
Yeah.
And I get why. I
Hmm.
get why. It wasn't just that. But I think every time you ask a reader to stop and reorient themselves,
Hmm.
you risk losing them.
Yeah.
And I would think, even though I don't, I mean, I read fantasy some, but my fantasy is not like this one.
Hmm.
But I would say this to anybody, even if you were writing in contemporary, like
Hmm.
being very intentional. And I think that's just it. I think if you
Yeah.
decide to do it, I am really intentional about, okay, what's the rhythm that we're establishing? Is there a
Yeah.
cadence? Is there a time where if you make the switch, a reader's not even going to think twice about it because they understand that when they're in a room, for example, and Vin is sort of in a corner and she's backing up, it's almost certain that the next one is going to be what is Vin seeing in that room,
Yeah.
as an example, right?
Yeah.
So
That makes
if
sense.
that happens, that then us as a reader, we're leaning in because we
Yeah.
want to know, Vin, what you see. Right
Hmm.
here, we're getting a perspective that we wasn't even expecting. Like there
Yeah.
was one moment where now we're in the like in the servants' room
Yeah.
in a part of their conversation and talking about laundry and all this other stuff. Listen, I understand why. I understand why it was there when you pull back. But if
Yeah.
somebody is not trying to study it and they're just enjoying their read, that shift can be a major shift. Now, if this is the norm that she establishes across the series or in the other books that are adjacent to this, then the readers of that series will be accustomed to it and it's not going to be
Sure.
as shocking. But if you're aiming to cast your net wider and get more readers into that series, you may limit it because of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation because that's what I was kind of thinking. It's like, oh, it's not jarring in Mistborn, but I had jarring experiences as well with the POVs. Quick question, because you got the ebook as well, right?
Hmm. I
Does
did.
it label at the top of the chapter whose perspective we're in?
Mm-mm.
Okay, because I will say that again, just genuinely from a production perspective, for the audiobook, it could be like, again, it took you at least a few sentences to be like, whose POV are we in? And it's interesting, right? Because that now the POV is still like that's still fundamentally like a story choice, but that's even a formatting choice that affects your sort of like your experience of the story. And it's amazing how something that like because when I was this is the second time I've listened to the book. I listened to it several years ago, but this time around, I noticed like, oh gosh, a really easy formatting fix that would just at least make it a little easier is something as simple as like Miriam, Wanda, Irina, like it just giving us like very clear like whose POV we're in at the chapter mark and like how
You
much
could,
kind of like that
but it
could
wouldn't
help
work because here she changes
within
points
the
of view
chapter.
mid chapter.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
think another thing that was a disservice is the fact that it was first person. You could have also
Hmm.
eliminated that a little bit if you would have gone with third person. But this,
Yeah,
y'all, the bigger, if you're listening to this, the bigger thing that this comes down to is this is when you start looking at why you make a point of view choice and
yeah.
how what supports the story most. So if she knew, for example, that she wanted to do that, it may be that she decided to do a third person because it's a
Hmm.
little easier to shift through those when you have a third
Yeah,
person than when we're in an I phase, right?
yeah,
And who is
that's
the
true.
I? You're so
Yeah.
like kind of confused. And again, it's not right or wrong. It's just what makes for the best reading experience, I think, more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I like that you take this approach of like just know your trade-offs, right? Like if
Yeah,
you're like I'm going to
definitely.
die on this hill for one reason or another, like that's fine, but knowing what you're trading off and then again possibly making decisions to help offset that trade-off to just smooth it over a little bit, that is 100% because there are certain like choices that may feel like they're the most important part of the story. And that's totally
Exactly.
okay, but understanding what you're risking or what you're losing or gaining so you can try to find other ways to lift that choice up to like almost counterbalance it as a for lack of a better phrase,
Exactly.
is really really important. And I think you're absolutely bang on about that. And I think the understand like just having that brief aside about Mistborn is really helpful because like what it also tells you is like Mistborn establishes in the first act exactly the cadence that we're working with. We know the first act, we're like, okay, it starts with like, so we already know that we're gonna get like occasionally like offshoot POVs because the prologue is Lord Trusting. Then it's
And remember,
Kelsier.
that was confusing to me at first too. Remember, I had to go
Yeah.
back and keep reading because and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but what you're saying is so important is the fact that when you establish the cadence, what you also do is, well, let me back up just a little bit, y'all. Whenever you're doing your first act, whenever we talk about the fact that you are in your character's comfortable situation, or we talk about that this is their status quo, you are also doing the same thing when you establish that cadence and that rhythm. So what you're
Mm-hmm.
telling them is this is what to expect. Here is the
Yeah.
story promise that I'm giving to you, even in structure.
Yep.
And that's the part where having that clarity helps us so that you reserve the shock for when you
Mm-hmm.
really want to give it to us. Don't shock
Yeah.
us because you change point of view. That's a
Yeah.
misuse of shock. Give us some good stuff. I don't know. Y'all, it might be a technical term that I don't know. But the point is, like, if you really want to save it, like, really,
Yeah.
if you want to give it to us, and give it to us for real, for real. Don't
Mm-hmm.
accidentally stumble into something. And then when you really shock us, I'm not shocked because now I'm confused. Don't do
Yeah.
that. Like, save your good. It's like, if you ever watched, what's it called? Big Daddy. He was like, we wasted the good surprise on you. Don't waste the good surprise on the wrong stuff. That's all I'm saying. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, but that's another important facet of the function of your first act, right?
Exactly.
Of like we're establishing our story promises and we're establishing expectations for the story, but also the expectation for how the story is going to be told. So again, with Mistborn, we're in Lord Trusting's POV, and I think sometimes that's a little bit offset by the fact that we're in a prologue, because a lot of times your
Exactly.
prologue will be in not your main point of view, and that's sort of like that when it's
And
in the prologue, it sort of limits limits the confusion, because it's like, oh, it's very common for a prologue to be in somebody else's point of view.
exactly.
And so we're interesting, and then we get Kelsier, and then chapter 1 is Vin, right? But then we go kind of Kelsier, Vin, Kelsier, Vin, Kelsier, Vin, so that we know what the story generally will feel like. But then when Brandon decides to kind of like go on like a little bit of a whim and throw just a couple of extra POVs in along the way, we're comfortable enough with the expectation he's established that we are surprised. We're like, "Ooh, I wasn't expecting you," but we don't feel so upended or confused. And I do think too, like third person makes that a bit easier as well, because he pretty much always starts the chapter within the first like 3 words. We have our proper noun of whoever's POV we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that's sort of like how he kind of manages that experience, I think. And it is different from what we get here, where we're like, we get Miriam, Wanda, and then in Act 2, we get like it's when we get introduced to Irina, and we're like,
Yeah,
you're here too.
and part of that too, and then we can move to the next one, so we won't like y'all. The big part of this is that this is so important, and a lot of times when people select POV, they do it. It's almost like a flippant choice, right? And this may be that there may be a norm that's established in your genre, but you make a different choice because you know it's going to do a more justice to the story. And so I think that's one of the things. And there was one moment in the story where I literally had to read it several times, and then I end up buying the ebook so I could read it because I thought I was wrong. When she started telling the story about the ring and the father training, and I'm like, wait, when did Miriam's father start training soldiers or whatever? I
Yeah.
was so confused, and it didn't say, and it didn't pop up because she wasn't fully introduced
Yeah.
until a little bit later, or something weird like that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say that this is one of those times where if you are reading a story and you're experiencing it as a reader, take stock of when you pause or when you're like,
Yeah.
wait, what? When you kind of have that like neck snap back. Now listen, y'all may not have a neck snap back, you may just be paused, if you're paused, then maybe take note of it, of what caused that, and ask, okay, what just happened? And was that really the author's intent? And I don't
Hmm.
think that no one would intend that. You would
Yeah.
want the story to go smoothly. And
Hmm.
so if you feel something, allow yourself the opportunity to stop and probe as to what just happened. And is there a way? Could they have done it differently? And you may
Hmm.
feel like, well, she could have, but you would have missed out on this fact, this
Hmm.
awareness, this element of the world because she wouldn't have had access to it. And just knowing that
Yeah.
can inform what are the details that you give when you are in her point of view, what are the things that you do before the transition and after, and it just
Yeah.
can sort of say, okay, I'm going to make this choice, so now how can I smooth it over so that
Hmm.
we won't get caught in the transition, we are more enthralled by what we're learning or the information that we're getting because
Yeah.
of that transition of point of view.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And again, just the Naomi Novik, super established. She already has a reader base. She already, right. This is like our Kennedy Ryan conversation of like,
Yes.
I wouldn't super recommend this. It's more like, if you're a debut or don't have an established author brand or reputation, this could serve you, like this could work against you instead of for you. And so that's why too, like when we look at the books that we're studying, to understand the author's position as well, because when you have a well established reputation and people trust you because of all your previous books, you can get away with more, or you can push, you can experiment with stuff and be like, "Ooh, what happens if I do this?" and run less of that risk versus if people don't know you, they don't know that they can trust you, and so things can rub them the wrong way, and that's why those things are important to really be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So part of that, like as we talk about this, that went beyond, but I think it was a really great point. I know you want to talk about the true villain, but I think this will be a great time first to talk a little bit about the plot, exploring themes before we talk
Yeah.
about the villain, because I think that was the same thing. It was the establishment of that and being able to have moments in those themes. So if you
Hmm.
could, if it doesn't throw you too much off, maybe talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I just, when we think about the way that the plot is framed in terms of, we look at Miriam getting sort of like co opted into this challenge with the Starrick King, where, again, success and failure both kind of suck. And then her involvement with the Starrick pulling her into a conflict with that a kind of a czar is like a czar level conflict. Um, and the kinds of decisions she has to make, and the way that her position in society and each of the women's position in society affects the choices that they are able to make. So we
Mhm.
have like some of our plot points for each female include, or for each of our, I'll say our primary three, includes forced marriage, right? And the way that economic distress and their position in the society impacts their again, their agency. And that, but it's not just like, oh no, that stinks, like it's actually driving the conflict of the story, right? So like,
Yes.
Wanda's experience, that's a major turning point in the story, and certainly
Mhm.
in Wanda's story. Miriam is forced into marriage with the Starrick King, and Irina, right, like the way that she gets sort of wrapped up into like the czar's game. And so, but these are propelling the actual conflict of the story forward rather than being in any way tangential. And you've also got the way that shapes the actual options that they have in their decision making. So they're wrapped up in these conflicts that they're bigger than everybody because they involve whole entire kingdoms and a larger kind of issue. But then what they have available to them to solve them complicates their ability to solve their problems because of economic position, because of being a female in society, and what they have to do in order to get agency. So Irina marrying into power, Miriam taking over the business, which is not a thing that anybody really wants her to do, except her grandpa. Her grandpa's like, oh yeah, you got it, kid,
Come
you're
on.
awesome.
Yes.
And he is like, he's the one cheering her on. But it's like, if we're looking at era and culturally, the unladylike profession, right? Going and
Mm-hmm.
collecting debts, knocking on doors and being like, you owe money, you put it in the bag, right? Like it's not giving, I'm a nice Jewish girl who's ready for a suitor. Um, and so but also the fact that like Miriam's father's inability to collect on the debts, it forces her to become a certain kind of person in order
Mm-hmm.
to survive, right? And I think that's part of what I really liked about the beginning, again, just for me personally, of this arc that she goes on. She has this mini arc in the first act that shapes the person she is in acts 2 through 4 because of this one crucial decision of, my mom is dying and my dad still won't collect on our debts. We are teetering on poverty. And the way she hardens herself to be someone who's capable of undertaking this kind of mantle. And I really just loved that progression and watching her fight for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the person that she chooses to become because of it. And so again, these are plot issues, right? So she takes over the business, and that's exactly what catches the attention of the Staric Lord, and then she winds up in a marriage, and then right. So all of these things are like, it's like the context itself that's driving so much of the conflict, which is allowing her to really explore what it is to be a woman in these times and what it is to
Mm-hmm.
be a Jewish woman in this kind of environment and what it means for her and how that also shapes the way she makes decisions, right? Because there's certain things that she's like, oh, if I do this, they're going to hate me more, but I'm not going to get the money, right? Like there's this really complicated relationship. And that allows her, like the actual external events of the story allows her to explore that again, rather than maybe feeling like you're trying to force it on top of a conflict that feels like it's about something else altogether.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you in that, and the only thing that I was thinking in my brain was like, do we need all the words to do it? And I think the answer is no. I
Yeah.
think the actual cycle of events was absolutely necessary because it's the
Hmm.
foundation on which she enters ultimately her marriage and how
Yeah.
she navigates that
Hmm.
relationship. And this
Oh
is
yeah.
where we really start talking about setups and payoffs, right? Where
Hmm.
you set up and we see them, and even the trifle cycle in this story is
Hmm.
off the chain. It is
Yeah.
beautifully done because what you do is you see how she begins to learn these skills, and it's not just happening. And
Hmm.
that, which, like, we don't have enough time to discuss everything like that this plot does that's beautifully. And so because I think that's another thing that's done beautifully, if you're ever a person who you struggle with that, but she
Yeah.
does, she's having to learn. And when she had, successes and failures, and how she built upon that it set
Hmm.
her up for what then comes later. And part of this that you really get a great opportunity because it is a longer story, so you do have some wiggle room with that. But I think it felt prolonged because you had the other two parallel stories happening at the
Yeah.
same time, and you gave them that same sort of
Same amount of
slow.
time.
Yes, that's all.
Yes.
I wanted
Yeah.
all of it. I'm not gonna feel like it all worked together in the end, but it's like, dude. Okay, so with
Yeah.
that, I'm gonna say this. Um, I love exactly what you're talking about right now, which I sort of hinted at earlier, which was how she used thematically bargaining. I love a good theme. I think using themes wisely in any
Yeah.
genre is so helpful because it allows you to explore the different dynamics of that theme and how they're at play in a story. It also becomes a really great tool to have in your pocket when you are thinking about subplots and how you will use the other characters that are in your story. So the way that it was done here in the themes and how they unfold, I thought it was so good, and how she sort of began to circle and dance around some of the same things. And as they sort of go out in the concentric circle of the world, and we begin to zoom out and not just about this one woman or this one family or this
Hmm.
one village or this one community, that we see that
Hmm.
it's bigger than what you think.
Yeah.
And I think she did that beautifully. So when we started looking at that bargaining thread sort of played out through the magic system, through the marriage, through the politics, through the economics, through the personal issues. And that is how theme can really be done well, because what it
Yeah.
did is it began in its own exploration to show us the dynamics in a y'all. I really think that there's probably another way of saying it, but this is my, self-talk to right self that is talking. Like, I really feel like what it does is almost like the same thing of when you tell people to show versus tell. You are showing us through the
Yeah.
dynamics of the relationship how this truly affects and impacts the individual, the community, the
Yeah.
economics, the like all the way through, without you having to sit and have this long drawn out in all these paragraphs trying to explain it. You are
Mm.
showing us because we're sitting inside of the pressure cooker with them. And
Yeah.
I just love how she did that. And then the fact that it was reoccurring, and even though she has a couple that I think are reoccurring, the fact that it is reoccurring allows her to continue to build on what she's
Yeah.
established. And again,
Mm-hmm.
that is so good. And then to take that and allow those moments to be the turning points, it became those moments where those three threads really became one, and then we turned.
Yeah.
And that is beautiful storytelling.
Oh,
Like, if you start
yes.
having all of these things, it's like if you make that happen,
Mm-hmm.
listen, how they say, they will forgive a multitude of sins. We will forgive a
Yeah.
multitude of sins.
Yeah.
You learn how to make that sort of point happen. And then as soon as that point happens, it almost splinters again, and then it comes back together. Especially when you have a story like this that doesn't have a lot of boom, bam, pow, right? You don't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of action like that. And it does pick up as the story progresses. But that's how you sort of almost have this, like, almost like fabricated, but it's not, because it's internal and it's relational,
Yeah.
but it helps to continue to move the story forward. And so that is one of those things that I really love. And when he
Yeah.
said that, I was like, oh, and you put it on the page. She did not come to play. She was like,
Yeah.
sit back and take notes. So I
Yeah.
love it, love it,
Yeah.
love it. So with that said, that sort of just like really brings us also to your other point that you wanted to talk about, which was the true villain. And sort of, it was almost nestled in what we're talking about right now. But I'd love
Yeah.
for you to kind of tell us like some of the thoughts that you want us to consider when it comes to the antagonistic energy in this story.
Yeah, I'll touch on it just super quick, mostly because I don't want to like. It really would get into spoiler territory to go to tell you too much
Yes.
about it. But what this story does is, in order to achieve this, so we have a true antagonist that we don't realize who it is, and who's really the problem in this story. And but she does it so that it doesn't feel like all of a sudden the story itself has changed. And I think the key to how she does this is the fact that at the beginning of the story she's already introduced the problem, right? Starrick Raiders and freaking winter keeps getting longer and longer, and it's causing problems for absolutely everybody. And the way that what happens in the first act is we're watching our protagonist alongside the issues that she's having with her family, and solving that problem. She's navigating that particular problem, and she thinks she knows what the problem is and where the problem is coming from, only to, throughout as the story evolves, to discover that she was wrong about the nature of the problem and where it comes from. And this is a really great sort of mechanism to use if you really want to, kind of have a twist in your story that is, the problem isn't what you think it is, because it's easy to sort of like, kind of fumble that kind of plot twist and make it feel like it comes out of left field, or for it to feel like you again change, like it was like almost like a bait and switch of like, we were getting this story and then all of a sudden it's like, we're in a different story altogether. But instead, the whole story being about tracking through, understanding, like unraveling the nature of the problem that was introduced in the beginning, so that by the time we get to the true villain, we have tracked this evolution, and so it doesn't feel, it's a like a good surprise, not a what surprise. So and then it leads through all the way to the crescendo of the story, into the climax of the story itself, so that you're still really kind of raising this question for the story that you answer at the climax, but in a really unexpected way.
Mhm.
And I think that's a great thing to keep an eye out for if you're really looking to kind of turn the story on its head and give us a twist like that without feeling like the story itself went off the rails.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I'm not gonna add anything to that. I think I'll add some more like later, but I will say ultimately, um, there were so many things that she did like this that's in this story that did make it so that you're like, huh, I love a good one of those moments, whatever you want to call it. It's not a aha, but like a, hmm, okay. Like, like you sort of lean in, and that was
Mhm.
one of them. And there were a couple others that were like that, but I think this one stood out most because it really felt like it was knocking on the door of romance. Like it was knocking on the door of enemies to lovers. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of giving those sort of vibes. So I absolutely love that. I will say, as an honorable mention, at the end of this, if you don't have any, and if you have anything else to add before we close it out, I'm not saying it here, and I just because I don't think we have a whole lot of time, and I don't know anywhere else that would like be as fitting. One of the things that I loved that kind of could go into plot is how she uses magic. I think the way that she used magic here, again, y'all know, I dabble in fantasy. I have fantasy clients and I know their work. So I just say I'm a dabbler, okay? But I know my stuff, but I dabble. But I love how you could look at it and there was just sort of like this layer of what magic was, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't just about um enchantment magic,
Mhm.
right? I felt like there was sort of Wanda's fascination with ordinary things that were magic to her because it was outside of
Yeah.
her understanding.
Oh, so
um
good.
it was, she was like, oh, it was magic. So she would start talking about numbers and she just would try
Yeah.
so hard. I just loved her so much. And then Arena, I would say her level of magic was really in her level of understanding and understanding how things function to use it to her benefit. That is
Mhm.
magic, right?
Yeah.
In how she used it. And then we see for Mira that she had real magic, but she had to understand how it worked and then how it operated in different spaces and different
Mhm.
time. And then there's so much other things that sort of were layered. But the reason why I wanted to point this out here is I feel like this is one of the things that people who don't write in this space can really take away from this, about
Yeah.
how you see a thing and how you interpret it and how you can allow your storytelling to give it layers. And when
Yeah.
you give it layers, you give it depth, because part of
Mhm.
this is about your lens and your perspective and how you write it.
Yeah.
So you can use that same sort of approach even doing a contemporary story, because of how you look at it through the lens of your characters and their
Yeah.
experience in the story. And so even though in a lot of ways they were talking about the real enchantment of magic,
Yeah.
it was that woman's or that point of view character's perspective that gave it its coloring and its
Yeah.
true lens, and it affected how she approached it and how she
Mhm.
approached the world. And
Yeah.
so I really enjoyed that, and it just became a layer of not just world building but of
Mhm.
character development
Yeah.
and the true engine behind the storytelling.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, totally agree.
Yes, oh, there are so many things to talk about. We can't talk about them all. So, with that said, was there anything else when it comes to plot that you really wanted us to be able to talk about before we close out this episode?
No, ma'am. No, I mean, there's so many more things we could talk about, but there everything that was on my list for what goes in the episode is we done and dusted.
So, with that said, y'all, we do not aim to cover every single thing. I believe that whenever you have these discussions and you listen to Rachel and I talk, and you see that we're almost a little bit on the opposite ends, we're in agreement, but kind of not, that means you really should dig in, because then you begin to understand like where you fall and why do you fall there and how does that help you
Mhm.
become a better storyteller. I don't think
Yeah.
in any way either of us are saying this is right or this is wrong. This woman
Yeah.
is clearly accomplished. She did not act. She says, "Listen, don't come for me unless I send for you," and you would be absolutely right.
She
Okay,
did not ask our opinion. That I
listen.
literally was talking to a student in the academy, and I was like, "Oh, like here's an example." Like I was using spin and silver of like, "Here's an example of these things." I made a mention of like the whole POV thing. I was like, "But she didn't ask me." You know, it's like she didn't ask for my opinion on this.
Listen, she did it. However, I do think that this is a great opportunity for you to see as a writer how you can learn so much just through
Yeah.
reading, and not just the exercise of reading itself. It's about asking yourself questions, things that stump you up, things that make you lean in, things that you keep thinking about even after you close the book. Those are
Yeah.
all those how you can learn, because the more you examine what stood out to you and begin to articulate what that is, the more you have tools in your toolbox that you
Yep.
can be able to call upon whenever you are writing. So, with that said, we're out of here. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Next week, we will be talking about the characters. And y'all, if we on plot, you know it's going to go in on characters. So get ready for it. You still have time to read this story. And we will be back to talk about characters. Don't forget to visit us online at storydeepdive.com so you can figure out how to find us, how you can ask questions, and how you can find all of our other episodes of this podcast. You can listen to it on most of your podcasting players, but you also can watch. Like, hey girl, hey. You can also watch on YouTube. It's the same episode, but you get to see our faces and our extraness live and live in color. Okay. So with that said, we are out. Have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining us. And as always, happy writing. Goodbye.